Happy Friday, everybody. Happy New Year, everybody. It is me, Nick Hausman from Haus Wrestling.
And me, Robert Karpeles of WWE Creative-ish.
And we have a big extended show here today for you. Now, as you have been told, we are supposed to be welcoming in Stephen P. New, CM Punk and Ace Steel's attorney, lawyer at large, onto the show here today to talk all kinds of topics. Now, we are dealing with a bit of a technical snafu at the top here with Stephen right now, where I got an email a few minutes ago, about 5 minutes ago to be specific, where he said the link is not working for him. So Stephen is trying to navigate his way onto the show as we speak. We hope that he joins us very, very shortly. But before we get to Stephen P. New here, who again should be jumping on any moment, Robert, you sent me this morning this article from the Players Tribune that AEW World Champion MJF penned. It's an emotional, candid piece. While we're waiting here for a moment or so for Stephen to jump onto the show, talk to me a little bit about like what you took away from this piece and where what it kind of tells you about where MJF's head is, I guess, at the moment.
Yeah, I think we know going into World's End on Saturday, the idea that this may be Max's last match in AEW. As he has affirmed, he has not signed a new contract yet with AEW. Whether that's true or rumor and innuendo, we'll put that to the side. But this was the world champion looking back on the last 5 years of AEW, and there were a number of really interesting, really strong takeaways. I think the first and foremost piece of it was, if you're rooting for AEW to fail, if you're rooting for AEW to collapse, to go away, you are rooting for the destruction of the wrestling industry in general. AEW, since it has existed, has created a companion piece for the WWE. It's given wrestlers an opportunity for better working conditions, better negotiating power, better creativity, chance to go out there and flex their muscle. It was him pointing out that as a guy who was 5'8" and was 21 at the time and Jewish, not a guy that necessarily would have been a world champion going into WWE, but the opportunities that were afforded to him in AEW have put him in a place to succeed. And while he is tired, he really does have an opportunity to make the business better. It's well worth reading.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody go check out that MJF piece. We both had a great time starting our day reading that. But without further ado, here we go, everybody. It's time to welcome onto the show our guest here today, a man we've been very excited to talk to. He is, of course, CM Punk and Ace Steel's lawyer. He's been making headlines from coast to coast here for the past week or so, and he wound up in a conversation with Chris Jericho and I over on X that we'll get into at some point. It's Stephen P. New. Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us here today. Stephen, can you hear us?
Fellas.
Good morning, Stephen. Yeah, your signal's a little choppy here right now. I don't know if there's any way you can.
Guys?
We're good. Your signal's a little choppy here.
It just started out a little choppy there.
Nope. Go ahead. We're listening.
Stephen? All right, let's try this. We should have done this earlier. I apologize. Are you guys getting me now?
Yes, now you're crystal clear.
Yes.
Can you hear us? Can you see us? Stephen, can you hear and see us?
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Okay, because there's a little bit of a lag right now. Are you doing all right? You okay? Stephen, this is going about as awkwardly and uncomfortably as possible right now.
It is possible Tony Khan is trying to block his
I think so. I had to switch from my MacBook to an older laptop because I was having trouble logging on.
Do you have an iPhone?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Do you Jesus Christ. Do you have an iPhone, Stephen?
I do.
Why don't you click the link on your iPhone and join us that way? Yeah, that'd be ideal at this point. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, wow. Well, hey, the joys of live, going live here, I guess, on Rumor and Innuendo. Jesus, I told him to connect early to do
it's
the
all right.
check.
Look, it's the he's got the best Wi-Fi you can get in West Virginia, which is basically just 2 tin cans and a monkey winding a string. That's the only West Virginia joke I'll make all day. I promise. We love all of our fans throughout the country. But you know what? These things happen. He is a zealous advocate for his clients, focused on that, not necessarily on how fast his internet is. Sometimes these things happen.
This is going so poorly. This is going so poorly in a way, to a point for the podcast version of this show that we will release on Monday. For the sake of that, I'm pretty sure that when Steven joins here, I'm just going to act as if everything we've done until he joined just and successfully connected just didn't happen. So
you need this in. This is a record. People need to know the truth, Nick. We are not signing an NDA. No one in the comments section is signing an NDA. They will be the truthers of what happened on the day we interviewed Stephen P. New.
Yeah, well, obviously there are forces in the pro wrestling universe that do not want us to talk to Stephen P. New because they are standing in our way.
He's back. Let's plug him back in.
All right, we're gonna try this again. Stephen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Sorry about that.
There we go. No problem. This was great.
I apologize because I can see you're holding the phone. If you want to lean it against something for this, that's fine. We're gonna do this all in real time, and then we're gonna take Stephen. We're gonna act like this never happened. We're gonna act like we just got to it. Are you comfortable, Stephen?
I'm good. I'm good, fellas.
All right, here we go. That's fine. We're gonna start this. We're gonna take a step back. We're gonna do this all over again. So one moment. All right, here we go. Welcome to Rumor Innuendo, everybody. It's me, House of Wrestling's Nick Hausman.
And me, WWE Creative Issues, Robert Karpeles.
And we are here with our Stephen P. New Year celebration on Rumor and Innuendo, where we are going to be talking to somebody that I know many of you have been excited for us to have onto the show, somebody that you all have questions about, questions for. Hopefully we can get into some of those in the chat room here. I know Robert has a laundry list of questions he's got for you, and I've got a few as well. But Stephen, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a really busy guy, and we have, like I've said, been very excited to have you on the show here today.
Thanks for having me on, fellas. I'm excited to be with you all as well. Happy New Year.
Happy Stephen P. New Year. I can only say it like that now.
Right.
Well, Stephen, obviously the reason that you and I connected is because we found ourselves in this social media thread with Chris Jericho a couple days ago. And, he said a lot of things about, his ability to talk about the brawl out situation. And you had some clarifications on your end about exactly why you don't think Chris would be allowed to kind of speak about whatever it is that he saw that day. I didn't know if you wanted to we could start there, maybe expound a little bit about what you know about how AEW contracts kind of work and why you were surprised by the way that Chris responded the way he did.
Yeah, the reason for that, without divulging too much of the confidentiality to which I am bound, my understanding is that everyone who was a quote-unquote witness to the incident at All Out 2022 would have been required to have signed an NDA. Chris indicated he was a witness. That means to me that he would have been investigated by the law firm that was investigating the incident and would have been required to have signed an NDA. Apart from that, though, it's my belief that AEW talent are bound to confidentiality. It's part and parcel of their policies, their handbooks, and that. So regardless, if Jericho was or was a witness to a portion of the incident, then he's still bound by company confidentiality.
Now, when you say that he was supposed to have been interviewed and signed an NDA as part of the investigation, does that call into question the way that you think that this investigation into the all-out incident was conducted, or is that just more of an observation?
It's just more of an observation. I don't know how in-depth the investigation got for, say, for instance, after the fact witnesses, people who came, essentially after their kerfluffle was over. And I don't know the scope of the investigation into whether it included after the fact witnesses, before the fact witnesses, or anything like that. And that hasn't been released, obviously.
Yeah.
And so the scope of the investigation would have to be known to know whether or not Jericho should have been interviewed, for instance.
I think what struck me the most interesting was it was Jericho interjecting himself and answering a question nobody asked him. And as someone who is obviously financially incentivized for the success of AEW, it doesn't make a lot of sense to reopen the conversation about what happened at Brawl Out, because the fallout from it has not been kind to All Elite Wrestling.
I agree. I mean, obviously, from my side, and I'm hardly objective either. I have clients whose interest I have to protect. I have to zealously advocate for them. So I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm a disinterested, objective observer either. I'm anything but. But along those lines, to what you just said, our side hasn't said a thing, and to just kind of reopen this 15 months later, while Ace is doing well, Lucy's doing well, Punk's getting ready to main event WrestleMania. Fingers crossed.
I was about to say, don't break any news you don't want to break here, Stephen.
Oh, stop.
Trust me, I'm not the source for that. I said fingers crossed. That as a wrestling fan of 42 years, that's my hope. But our side's done well. We've abided by the confidentiality, and it's just senseless to kind of reopen that. As you indicated, Robert, there is no good reason for anyone to reopen that.
So I have a couple of questions. I will try not to make this a deposition. It is an occupational hazard on both our parts here. And I will preface to those folks listening, Stephen is not avoiding anything. If I ask him if he is bound by confidentiality or attorney-client privilege, we're not trying to get anybody disbarred. We tried that with Matt Jones when he was on talking about how great Kentucky was as opposed to the University of Florida. And we're not dealing with any Gator bashing here, but we will keep Stephen preserved. My understanding was you were brought into this a few months after the incident happened. So as a wrestling fan, were you aware of how Nick Hausman single-handedly started this whole problem? Were you aware of the Brawl Out incident? And when you got into it, were the facts kind of aligned with what we as the general public were somewhat made aware of?
Yes and no. I was aware for reasons that I can't disclose of a lot of things that occurred very close in time. That's about all I can say about that. I didn't know Hausman kicked all of that off, but that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. I infamously went into the ring with a live microphone and called out the issues in the backstage area. And so that was me. I know a lot of people thought it was Hangman Adam Page, but that was actually Nick Hausman under a short-term AEW contract.
Yeah, you brought the pastries, didn't you, Hausman?
I did. It was me.
Yeah,
I was
pastries. But to answer your question, I was involved in that situation very early on. And so even before Ace and Punk reached out a good bit later, I had been aware of what was going on. And in terms of what was being publicly reported, who knows where as it's pro wrestling, who knows where all of those stories were coming from. Some seem to be very accurate and seem to come from, people with knowledge, and some seem to be fairly off base.
Which is surprising given, we've talked about there is potential confidentiality language wrapped up in their contracts. I noticed that theme with All Out. I noticed that with what happened at Wembley with All In, that as the incidents were actively occurring, we were almost getting live, like blow by blow, play by play. What is it? And you said Punk and Steel reached out to you. Given where you are in West Virginia, what was it that made them say, Steven's someone we want to contact, or how they got in touch with you?
I think just the fact that I have for the past few years represented a lot of people in the professional wrestling industry. From everything from intellectual property work with a guy that I collaborate with by the name of Dusty Gwynn, and we can talk about Yeet and some other intellectual property matters here in just a little while. But I think that those guys were comfortable with me being really familiar with the industry itself, a lot of the personalities, knowing that I had dealt with AEW's legal department before, from things minor to things major. And I think that probably gave those guys a bit of comfort with me. I'm still surprised that there are people out there who think that I'm one of Cornette's like gimmicks or something like that, like his Gardner, whatever his name is, or what have you. I mean, guys, I've been licensed to practice law for 25 years. I've got cases going in 10 different states right now of various kinds and sorts.
Oh my God, he's back.
Oh.
Okay, he got a call. Sorry, I'm sure. Steven, you're muted now. You got to hit the unmute button. He can't. I don't know if he can even hear me right now. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. You got to unmute yourself, Steven. You got to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. This is going fantastic. Oh, but he's gone. Steven? No,
Nope,
you
you're
got to
still muted, Steven.
You got to unmute yourself. Somehow you've muted yourself. We can't hear you. Steven, we cannot hear you. I don't know what happened here. Oh, this is going so well. Hey.
Oh, it's fine. Hey, we were getting there. He may have to call out and call back in.
We can't hear. If you need to leave and come back in, oh, that's the side of his table. Can't hear you.
But I think what was
still can't hear
what
you,
was
Steven.
interesting there that we're getting head nods. I don't know if that means he can hear us, or if he can hear us. We're not able to hear you.
We can't hear you.
I mean, you may need to close out and dial back in.
Or check your settings.
There he goes. That's fine. Okay. But you know what? I think what was really interesting just in that list, that first little bit, my takeaway was he talked about how he had been dealing with AEW before, and that he was involved in Brawl Out even before Punk and Ace Steel engaged with him, which is I think definitely interesting.
Steven, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. Yeah, we can hear you now. I don't know what happened there, buddy.
Well, I got a phone call. The whole world's decided to blow me up right in the middle of right in the middle of the Rumor Innuendo podcast, which couldn't be a better name for why you're having me on today.
Thank you. All right. Well, I wanted to follow up real quick before Robert goes back down his path of questions. You talked about how much you've had to talk to AEW management and their front office in regards to other cases. What are your impressions of what it's like to communicate, I guess, at the front office of AEW? What do you glean from them, just in general when you have to engage them?
I said this on Rip Rogers' podcast. All of my dealings just progressively got better over the past few years. I've only had a couple of interactions with Tony Khan and, conference calls, Zoom calls, I think. And those have been positive. Dealing with the legal department started out a little rocky. I think Joey Janela was saying that his tag team was going to use the name Midnight Express. So obviously I reached out. And in the course of communicating, I may have called him Jelly one time, to which Mega took great exception. But other than that, nothing but positive things to say about the way I was always treated, have been, and am treated by their upper management.
So interesting you brought up Mega, which was my next question. In your dealings with them for this particular matter, was AEW fielding this out to an outside counsel, or was this entirely in-house? I know from working professional sports teams, we typically go to an outside counsel for these sort of specialized matters. I don't know if AEW has a bulked up legal team to handle all this in-house.
For what I was involved in, we were able to handle everything just with their in-house counsel.
Okay. And in working with them, I'm guessing, well, we saw, Punk was off TV, then he was back on TV. So I have to assume that, and Ace Steel was back. So I have to assume that your goals that you set out for your clients were met and in some ways probably exceeded.
I would say that's probably a fair read into the situation.
And were you surprised? that after all this went down, and obviously all these NDAs in place, that everybody was able to kind of go back and work together? Or did you kind of have a feeling that this might not last?
I didn't have any feelings on it one way or the other. I thought that Collision might assist that or go a long way towards that. So I didn't really have any strong feelings about that one way or the other.
What was your reaction though when Ace was pulled from being allowed to be at Collision? And I mean, especially in your reaction to his termination in general after the incident, he was the only one that really suffered like meaningful consequences, it would seem, because of this.
Well, I can't really speak to that because it goes to that absolutely goes to the heart of my representation. So, it was just a fact that we had to deal with, but it goes to the heart of the representation there.
So something that's come out online is that Ace's wife did not sign an NDA, and that she is someone who has the ability to talk about what happened there. Did you have any knowledge that she had not signed an NDA, and are you surprised that she wasn't put under one?
Surprised, yes, and it's just that is just a fact.
Oh, absolutely. It struck me as odd because I know you mentioned with Jericho and the other folks, like obviously for AEW's sake, they're going to want everybody that was a witness to this to keep it buttoned up. It feels like on their part, it was a big lapse by All Elite Wrestling.
I can't speak to the thinking behind it. I just know that she's not.
That's interesting. I'll be interested to hear her side of it, if she ever comes out of it. I mean, do you feel like she'll ever talk about it, or do you think this is something that they're just kind of looking to move past?
I think they're looking to move past. They're in such a good place now. I don't look for, Ace obviously can't, Punk obviously can't, Lucy could, but I don't think that she wants to, despite the fact that she could, because we're 15, 16 months removed from Brawl Out, and I really just think it's not on their minds. It's not something that concerns them.
Mm-hmm. Which makes Jericho's comments all the more concerning, because not only is he saying he's not under NDA, he was making potential accusations about Ace Steel's wife and her behavior, which feels like you're provoking her to come out and start saying what happened.
Well, and I don't know the motivations, but behind that, it's
best not to try to figure out Jericho's motivations for your own health and safety.
To my clients to stay engaged with this.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. I mean, you had to be thrilled watching Survivor Series. Did you have any idea that Punk was going to show up before he walked through the curtain?
I'm not going to divulge any attorney-client privilege there.
All right, I want to take one question here about the Punk situation from Teddy in our YouTube channel, we blocked out Steven's face. So I'm gonna take it off the screen. He asked, about the Kenny Omega and the Bucks reenacting the backstage fight in the ring not long after. Now, do you feel like that violated any kind of agreements that were put in place? I mean, again, there were other instances where it feels like the Elite were kind of leaning into making references to kind of what happened in a way that the Punk, at the very least, was not able to or was doing at the time.
It was in poor taste, but I don't know that it violated any kind of NDA or anything like that. It was the AEW equivalent of Kevin Nash dressed up as Arn Anderson dropping a bottle of beer in the ring. It was really poor taste, but I don't think it violated any kind of NDA.
All right.
That's fair. So something that came out after the fact, when Punk was ultimately terminated from AEW, there was a lot of talk about a disciplinary committee that AEW had that was Bryan Danielson and some lawyers. I'm sure you heard that story just sort of as a layperson, as attorney in general. Were you surprised that this came out? I mean, are you surprised that you have an active wrestler like Bryan Danielson who has to make these sort of employment decisions?
Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised that came about. Based on what I know, not from my representation of anybody, but just based on what I've read, with different sources and things has been needed for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure
agreed.
that they needed something. I mean, this whole thing certainly exacerbated because there have been, you've been a fan for a long time, there have been fights in the back with wrestlers for decades, but this involved executive vice presidents of the company. So that is what made this go to a much higher, much more difficult level, and probably had to make your navigating through AEW that much trickier.
Yeah, I mean, that committee has existed subsequent to my representation of anyone. So I haven't had to actually deal with that committee yet, for any kind of fines levied or anything like that. I'm sure that the day may come that I have to, but I haven't thus far. I just know, when you get the Sammy Andrade situation, or other violations of policies, whether from on-air talent or backstage employees or whomever, somebody needs to be able to effectively deal with that stuff.
Well, Shawn Michaels decades ago threatened Vince with unsafe working conditions. That was a reason why he was trying to get out of his contract. I was surprised that at no point in time was that ever publicly talked about with the number of things that have happened in AEW.
Yeah, it's some folks have joked about that and things like that. Like I've been to a number of AEW shows. I was ringside in DC for the first show. A few weeks later, there in Charleston, West Virginia, I'm ringside there. And then Charleston, West Virginia, the night of Kenny Omega's return, where he compared the fans to cat litter. But anyway, that very night, someone, I think in a trios match or something, went out into the front row onto an 8-year-old girl from West Virginia. So, you kind of, you chuckle at those things, but I think they've been lucky so far, except for, some concussions and things like that. Pretty lucky so far that nothing major has happened.
So I want to shift gears for a moment, because something that came up of late was that you were involved in the.
Oh wait, before we get to Yeet, I have one.
Okay, you.
I have one. We can pivot to Yeet in a moment.
Pivot, here. Nick. You pivot back.
I only have one. I'm sorry. I'm the only non-lawyer in this, so I'm sitting here watching this like a courtroom drama right now, and I'm enthralled by it from that perspective. But my question here before we get to the Yeet stuff is, as part of Punk's termination, there's all these people that claim that he had to sign some kind of non-compete or some kind of NDA pertaining to his exit from AEW. Now, we know about the NDA involving Brawl Out, right? But do you know of any conditions that were placed upon Punk upon his release from AEW, or was it just you're fired, you're out, and there are no conditions to that release?
I can't really speak to that with respect to Punk. What I can say is that the contracts vary for whether or not non-competes remain in place, the types of terminations and that kind of thing. But in terms of him specifically, there's no way that I can get into that.
Man,
sure,
okay,
but
fine.
I will say I was surprised when AEW made their announcement about Punk leaving, that they publicly said that he had been terminated for cause, which is not something you typically see. Usually it is best of luck in your future endeavors, or we have whatever. This was, in my opinion, probably the most aggressive release notice we've ever seen from a company.
Yeah, it was clear why.
Do you feel like Tony's comment about how he feared for his life over
Sorry, that still makes me laugh.
Well, I mean, it's really funny, but I mean, I heard it too, and I was just like, that's super inflammatory. Like, we know that there's video out there and stuff, and people, I guess, maybe down the road will get to see how threatening the situation was. But it certainly was the kind of statement that raised my eyebrow and was like, if I'm seeing Punk, that's a pretty strong assertion to be being made my way. I didn't know if you felt it overstepped when he made that statement.
He's welcome to comment on however he felt about whatever.
Okay, got it. Wonderful. All right, Yeet.
I'm going to get to the Yeet piece of this, and Steven turned off his. Oh, there he is. He's back. So the interesting thing about the Steven's muted again.
Steven, I think you need to jump out and jump back in. We can't hear you. We
Yeah.
can't hear you talk. 1 second. He's going to jump out. Oh man, this is great. This is good television. Well, we're going to get to Yeet here in a second. Before we get to Yeet, do we want to is there any comments, thoughts you want to make about what we've learned here from his from what he's told us about the Brawl Out CM Punk situation?
I mean, I think to me the biggest surprise was that AEW is handling this in-house. That would have been something I would have assumed they would have tried to push to outside counsel.
All right, here we go.
Steven's back.
Yeet.
Sorry, guys.
No
It's
problem.
okay.
You're an in-demand guy. We understand.
Closing segment. We'll wrap with Yeet here,
Yes.
Steven. So you
So
can go
the-
back
so
to
the-
real work. Okay, go ahead.
The interesting thing about the Yeet piece, and I will, from what I understand, is there was a wrestler who had the intellectual property rights to it. And if nothing else, because I know we have a lot of independent wrestlers who do watch the show, it stressed the importance of why you need to protect your IP. And I wanted to give you a moment to touch on that. And obviously, we've seen why this is so valuable.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy the way that this came about. A young man from Boone County, West Virginia, who wrestles for a local promotion here that I sponsor and enjoy a lot, called All Star Wrestling. Casey Huffman started using a gimmick, Yeet, and Yeet movement in independent wrestling. Casey had been successful. He had wrestled at NWA and dark matches at AEW when they were close, and had been successful on the independent circuit. Comes to me and my partner in the sports agency and says, "Hey, do you guys think that you can trademark Yeet?" So we started undertaking that for him in late 2021. And because of the nature of the phrase, it was, a difficult. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office didn't really understand what a gimmick is and that kind of thing. And so we had applied for it for pro wrestling as well as merchandise. And the merchandise was kind of the hang up there. Well, lo and behold, a few months ago, Jey Uso starts using it. And, Casey reaches out to me. He's like, "Haven't we applied for that?" And I'm like, "Well, you've got a common law trademark regardless, because you started, about all I know about intellectual property law is that first use trumps.
Yep.
And if you started using it first, more likely than not, if you can afford to go through the process, first use is going to win." And so, we felt good about our case. I reached out to WWE once the shirts started being sold. And, I can't comment on the terms or anything like that, but it resolved. My client's happy for Jay that he's going to profile this on a much larger scale. And, it was just really good working with them on that. But to your point, Robert, if you are an independent wrestler, or, if you've had some success in professional wrestling, I really think that it behooves you to invest in that part of your career. If you have created makeup designs, tattoos, in-ring gear, merch, anything like that, invest in that and apply through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to trademark that stuff. Prove that when you first started using it and that you've used it in commerce, and make that investment in your career, guys and gals.
It did surprise me that WWE didn't do their due diligence in releasing merchandise by just doing a cursory search first. When I was there, we had this problem as well. There was a phrase that was used that they didn't properly check. It just seems like that's 101 of intellectual property. You go and search and make sure that this is something that you're actually able to use.
Right. Because they could have seen pretty clearly, that there was a Yeet being used in connection with pro wrestling, and there was a trademark application pending.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, is this wrestler and Jey Uso, are they the only ones that can use the Yeet catchphrase now? Is it off limits for other wrestlers unless they want to come to an agreement on it?
I have to be careful here, Nick.
See, I'm not the lawyer, so I just ask like layman questions. I'm just like, I don't know.
What I can say is that no one else can use that term now.
Okay, got it. So, warning to all you indie wrestlers out there who want to get yeet-tastic, I guess.
Yes, don't go start making yeet merch
Right.
and selling it out there, because Steven will hunt you down.
No, not Steven.
I'm making you the Yeet Hunter. That's your new title. There's a question that someone posed here that's interesting. Rick Smith had asked if you had any, since you are a wrestling lawyer now, if you have any opinions on Jerry McDevitt
and his departure,
and his departure, but more just in looking at the legal profession. I know he was, when I was younger, influential in me wanting to go be an attorney. Seeing the success that he had, I'm curious if you've had any thoughts, interactions, any of that.
I haven't had any interactions. He was at Kirkpatrick and Lockhart in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
And the graduates of WVU who do really well and were on law review, they go to Kirkpatrick and Lockhart in Pittsburgh. And those of us who were on moot court and are trial lawyers move back home to the coal fields and make money the old-fashioned way. We earn it. And so those K&L lawyers are something else. But McDevitt's results, I mean, he's a proven winner. He's got the track record of being a winner, being loyal to Vince for many, many years. That loyalty was rewarded. And so, what can you say about a guy whose results nobody could ever question, right? So,
I mean, I think that's benefited you as well. You worked with Cornette. You've now worked with a number of different wrestling personalities over the years, and you've become on a national stage someone that, if there's something going on with wrestling, there's always the strong possibility that Steven's going to wind up in there, and getting that niche has got to be fantastic for those of us former moot court members.
It is. Take, for instance, the Joey Ryan case that I got involved with the wrestler Pele Siklis. Joey Ryan sues Pele Siklis in California and, makes a bunch of allegations about him. And what do you know? I'm on a Zoom call in a courtroom in California arguing jurisdiction motions against Joey Ryan. Of all people. So needless to say, I didn't do the flip.
I was going to say, was the concern?
We won. We won. I didn't do the flip, but I lost the TRO. A lot of the smart alecks, the smart marks, want to remind me of Cornette's loss of the TRO on the T-shirt to the independent wrestler. He GCW wrestler Brandon Graver. A couple years. You lost. I lost the TRO over $800 worth of T-shirts, and Cornette was just like, "Cut it off."
I was hoping you were going to do a Cornette. Like, no one can tell a Cornette story without doing a Cornette impression.
That's right.
And I had a feeling you had one in your back pocket. I'm glad we got that here.
Well, Steven, I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving us some of your time today. We will definitely have you back to talk some other less I mean, Robert really, I felt like put you under a spotlight here tonight and made you sweat a little bit. I mean,
there's no sweat on me. Robert's just really good at what he does, but it's been my pleasure, guys. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties we have. That's what I get for using a MacBook instead of a PC, right? So
we'll get it right next
the
time.
AEW devil.
Yeah, we'll get it right next time. Steven, thank you so much. Anything you want to plug here before we wrap it up with you today?
No, I'll plug my own wrestling podcast. It's 5 guys from Southern West Virginia who are just, big time wrestling fans, House of Kayfabe, or you can find me on Twitter at Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com. I thank you guys so much for having me on. I always love to talk wrestling with really great guys like yourselves. And thank you for having me on today.
No problem, Steven. We'll see you another time. Take care, my friend.
Steven.
Bye. All right, Stephen P. New. We made it happen. Well, hey, for everybody who tuned in here today, thank you so much. Please leave a review on the podcast feeds. We always appreciate you. I'm Nick Hausman, House of Wrestling.
I'm WWE Creative Ish's Robert Karpeles. Best of luck in your future endeavors.
But wait around, everybody. It's time for the second recording. We're going into overtime. Hey, everybody, it's me, Nick Hausman. Welcome to Rumor and Innuendo.
And me, Robert Karpeles of WWE Creative Ish. You threw me off. We just started going into it, and here we are.
I botched it. Hey,
it's fine.
All go, all flow, all show here on Rumor and Innuendo, everybody. We got a lot to get to here today. If you are listening to us in audio form, it is Friday, and you're going to get nothing but the news. But on New Year's Day, come back to the podcast feed because you're going to get to hear the full audio from our more than half-hour conversation with CM Punk and Ace Steel's lawyer, Stephen P. New. And if you're watching us in video form right now, you already saw it. You saw the fun. You saw the highlights. You saw the technical difficulties. We had a great time. You jumped in the chat room. It was good. Before we get into this news here, Robert, do you want to give people a couple of your big takeaways from what we learned from our conversation with Stephen?
Sure. So for those of you who are going to listen on Monday, you're going to hear the full piece of it. But we kind of got into a little bit of what Stephen's initial involvement was in Brawl Out, which was a surprise to me that he had been engaged even before Punk and Ace Steel were involved. He gets into his interactions with the AEW legal team, him interacting with Tony Khan and how that went. Some of the fallout that we've seen from CM Punk's departure. And the other piece that I thought was kind of interesting is we talked a little bit about he was involved in the Yeet lawsuit that we have talked about here on the show, and some really interesting insight on what wrestlers should be doing and concerning themselves with. So I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's always cool to have knowledgeable wrestling lawyers on here. We've had Matt Jones. We now had Stephen P. New. I'm curious if Clarence Mason is floating around somewhere.
Well, Jerry McDivitt came up. I tried to get us Jerry. I don't know what he's doing right now, but he gave me time in the past.
You will rarely see me mark out, but if you get Jerry McDivitt, well, that will turn into the Chris Farley show. Where I'm like, hey, remember when it was WWF? That was awesome.
Fantastic. No, real quick, the backstory, because I think one of Jerry McDivitt's only on the record, I think maybe the only on the record video interview ever. And it was because I wanted to talk to him about, I forget exactly which case it was. Oh, it was the concussion one. It was the one that went to Supreme Court and got dismissed or whatever. He gets on to talk to me. I go, hey, do you mind if I record this and release it? And he's like, what do you mean? Like in public? And I was like, yeah, let's just record it. And he was just like, he thought about it for a second. He was like, okay, sure. And I got him right there on the spot. We just ran with it. It's still out there if anybody wants to go find it. But I'll do my best, Robert. If that'll make you happy in 2024, I will do my best to go get us Jerry McDivitt.
Well, hopefully he's available and they don't reveal that he's the AEW devil.
Yes. Well, hey, I've got high hopes for some of the guests here in 2024. That's for sure. And also, real quick, while we are getting through some housekeeping at the top of the show, the reason you'll get the Stephen P. New interview on Monday in audio form is because we will not have a video version on New Year's Day. I will be likely very hungover, not wanting to do a show, so that's why we won't be doing one on Monday. Also, before I run down all the news we're going to get to here today, I did want to make sure to send out our regards to the family, friends, and fans of British independent pro wrestler Mad Curtis Chapman, who passed away at the age of 26. Way too young. I did not have the privilege of getting to work with Kurt, but I am seeing just an outpouring of love from so many of my friends on social media right now, and I just wanted to send my regard to everybody out there who's coping with that today.
Way too young. I saw Joey Janela posted something about him and how funny the guy was, and I feel like that's something that fits in my world is humor in the world of wrestling. So really sad story to start with here on the last show of 2023.
Well, everything we're getting in here today includes AEW revenue, the latest on the Devil, WWE interest in Giulia and Stardom, WWE re-signing Zelina Vega, more on why Takami Ohbari stepped down as New Japan president. But before we get into any of that, I see our good friend, this guy, over on X, jumping into the comments section. You got to talk about MJF's post. Now, earlier, while we were having tech issues, we briefly touched on it, but I'm going to have had to erase all of that audio because I've chopped it out for fluid reasons over on the podcast feed. But let's take a second here before we roll into all this other stuff to talk about what Maxwell Jacob Friedman put out over on the Player Tribune. It is no secret that Max has been dealing with a litany of injuries over his more than year run now as AEW World Champion. I'm surprised he did not die in that match against Bryan Danielson. Holy hell, what a brutal beating. And of course, he's been rolling around with a walking stick here the last month or so. In this piece, there's a lot to take away. The big thing for me is that he's on painkillers right now, and he's very uncomfortable about that. And it shows how hard he's pushing himself to deliver for everybody. But it does make me feel consciously that maybe he's pushing himself too hard if he's put himself in that position. What did you think about that, and anything else you took from that piece, Robert?
Yeah, I think he was getting out ahead of that and just saying he's doing everything he can to go out there and perform. And I'm sure that the medical personnel are keeping tabs on him. The biggest takeaway that I had from that was it felt like this was a referendum on the wrestling industry and why it is so important that AEW exists. He talked about how 5 years ago, before AEW was there, working conditions were a lot different than they were now in the business. You had one company you can go work for, and if not, you kind of had to piecemeal a life only on the indies. And life has been better for folks in WWE since AEW has started. Life has obviously been better for AEW. These guys have consistent weekly paychecks. They're getting national and international exposure. He addresses a lot of the criticisms of the company, which he fully says, hey, I'm critic number one sometimes of AEW. I get it. Tony Khan, he cares about his wrestlers. He honors their contracts, which is super important in the wrestling business. He talks about Jericho. He talks about Kenny and the Bucks. He's careful not to overpraise them, but it is saying, hey, these guys stir stuff up, and that's kind of what you want from the business. And that Jericho, yes, there are some issues with this guy now, and he's someone that you can take shots at. But when he first came to AEW, it gave that company instant credibility. And you owe a lot to Chris Jericho's initial involvement. Same thing with Moxley. And he also took thinly veiled shots at folks who came into AEW thinking this was going to parachute them back to WWE. And AEW chewed them up and spit them out. So it felt like a defense of the company and also a little bit of a, let me look back on the last 5 years in case I'm not going to be there come January 1.
Yeah, obviously the Jericho part of it, for a lot of reasons, stood out to me. One of the things that, is so disconcerting to me about kind of the universal praise of Jericho, and I'm not going to deny the points that Max made about, the impact Chris had in the early days of AEW. But when you have that kind of clout and you have that kind of power, it's very important to use that responsibly. And I just, there are issues with Chris behind the scenes where I know of a lot of people who have been hurt by Chris and his actions. And, it's very uncomfortable to me to see him lauded as often as he is, with only the focus on that, because I do think that there's a lot of questionable stories about Chris that will find their way out over time. And when people are ready to tell those stories, that will cast him in a very different light. I mean, look, Harvey Weinstein won a lot of Oscars. Harvey Weinstein produced a lot of very popular films. Harvey Weinstein is now in jail. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Chris, but your narrative can very quickly turn if you're hiding a lot of skeletons in your closet. I also think, in regards to what he said about how much the business has benefited from having an AEW around, better pay for wrestlers, better treatment of wrestlers, is all true. I know we stand on different sides of the aisle on this one, Robert, but I still think there's a need for a wrestlers union. All very valid points that Max made, but I think to ensure that you retain a lot of that leverage that you have in this moment, which may not be here tomorrow, it's important to get everybody in line and take care of themselves. And, there were certainly some things that were framed in a certain way in Max's piece that I thought were very rah-rah and great for people to run with. But, as somebody who's, again, I'm not rooting against AEW. I want the very best version of AEW. I want AEW to be around for a long, long time. But there were certainly some things that, I looked at very critically.
Look, I think he was towing a line there in a number of different ways. I think he was more than generous when he talked about the perceived MJF fatigue and that it was natural he was going to cool off. I will respectfully disagree with Max and say that I don't think it's MJF fatigue. I think it's been poor booking that he has been going along with and participating in. And he even copped to a lot of bad luck that the Punk issue wound up happening, Adam Cole getting injured, just a number of things that feel like he's walking under ladders near broken mirrors. But I think part of what has cooled off MJF in 2023 has been Tony's booking and handling of him. And I'm hoping for better things in 24 with a healed up Maxwell Jacob Friedman.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And on the note of what Max is being booked in, we do have this note here from the Observer basically saying AEW is not profitable, which I was going to lead off with, but I think we all kind of shocked.
It's almost like we've been saying it for the last couple weeks, but
shocked.
Yes, we've made more money, but we've lost significantly more. If I go and tell my wife, good news, I won $100 at the casino, and ignore the fact that it took me losing $4,000 to win that $100, it kind of colors it a little bit. But I couldn't see a way in which AEW was actually profitable right now. But we don't need to answer for that. It's really if Tony is okay with this thing going forward. He doesn't have outside investors. He doesn't have shareholders. It is his company. And if he's comfortable losing that money, which a number of not only wrestling promoters, but another piece of this coming from the sports world, almost every professional sports team is in the red. They are constantly losing money. They are rarely a cash cow, a profit machine. You're doing it for the love of the sport. You're doing it for a little bit of glorification of your ego. And if Tony is liking what he's doing, more power to him.
Yeah. So back to Max and how he's being booked. Nice little segue. I liked that.
Love it.
Yesterday was the AEW media call for World's End with Tony Khan. I jumped right off of this show onto that call. Unfortunately, didn't get to ask a question, but I did get to get a lot of good insight along with the rest of the media. You want to say something,
I'm just
Robert?
annoyed that I wanted to know Tony's insight on Billy and the CW, and we're just never going to hear it.
It was something I was hoping to get to, but much like this show, we may not have time for it today. But anyway, Tony's on this call, and he says that fans, because he gets asked about the AEW, I believe Steve Fall from Wrestling News Co. asked him about the AEW storyline, where it's going, when we can expect a payoff, and he says he's expecting big revelations, multiple. This Saturday at AEW World's End. He also went out of his way to clarify that Samoa Joe is not the devil, right? Which I love is we're getting this kind of storyline point on the media call. I digress. Samoa Joe's not the devil, but we are going to get these big revelations at the World's End. On top of what Max wrote in the Players Tribune, and also this note that I put up on the site yesterday that a lot of people didn't notice, Max wore the AEW title upside down on Wednesday's episode of Dynamite, which I had to go back and watch because I saw somebody share it. I was like, wow, that really actually happened. It just it feels like a lot of breadcrumbs that Max is getting us up to the precipice that he's going to be taking some time away from AEW and wants to give off the impression maybe there's a chance he's not going to remain with AEW, which I think is storyline personally, but we'll see how it plays out. You want him to leap. You want him to leap, obviously.
I've wanted Max in WWE for the last 5 years. That's not really much of a surprise, but if he's happy, Mazel Tov, more power to you. First, the Tony Khan piece. Tony has to stop doing this. If you're like, oh, we may get a revelation about the devil on Saturday. I think we're kind of aware of who's holding the pencil. Just let what's going to happen. But this felt like him admitting, even I know this has gone on way too long. We need to put an end to this, or something different needs to happen. Please tune in. You can't get away and do that in wrestling. You can do that if you're a showrunner on a scripted television show and say, this season, we're going to pay off Ross and Rachel. We're finally going to see what's going to happen to them. As wrestling fans, you want to sit back and wonder what's going to happen. And it felt like Tony's spoiling his own show. So he's got to resist that urge.
Man, it really is. I don't want to beat a dead horse because we talked a lot about the devil this week. But if it's not Adam Cole, then I don't know. Is it going to be Tony? Is it going to be Vince McMahon, Steve Austin 2.0? Max takes some time away, comes back in a knee brace and just raises hell to try to take down the boss? Are we going to run it back?
I love that he had to clarify it wasn't Samoa Joe, as if you saw the devil in his costume and thought, that 180-pound frame could be Samoa Joe in some really tight Spanx. But good, bad, or indifferent, This is the first AEW pay-per-view all year. I have gotten a number of messages from people asking, are you going to tune in and watch? So there is clearly intrigue. Some of it might be schadenfreude, but there is intrigue about what's going to happen here. And this is why wrestling as storyline is successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I like I pointed out yesterday, it has driven a ridiculous amount of traffic for House of Wrestling, for this show. The article I wrote on Wednesday night, I believe it's titled "Top AEW Star Turns on MJF in Twist to AEW Storyline," has been the number one
tight headline right there.
Thank you. It has remained the top trafficked item on the website since it went live. I have put out many other news items on the site in that time. This thing continues to just coast, and I'm pretty sure it got picked up in some search engine somewhere or whatever, but it is coasting at the top of the House of Wrestling stats right now.
Well, AEW has benefited from the fact that WWE is essentially dark this week. Raw and SmackDown are both best of shows. So AEW has the entire wrestling landscape to themselves. And when you don't have Chris Jericho tripping over his own 2 feet, you have a chance to dominate the news cycle in hopefully positive ways.
Well, we will talk about the best of episode here in just a moment, but before we do, I want to acknowledge that Sean Spears is no longer, or will be no longer, with AEW here at the top of the year. He confirmed it over on Instagram, saying it was a personal choice and one that is best for him and his family at this time. He's been with the company 5 years. He was an original hire. Obviously, he had that high-profile feud with Cody where he bashed him with a steel chair. Fightful saying split was amicable. Cody Rhodes, his good friend, has shown love to him over on X. And Fightful saying that Spears has been portraying one of the devil's masked men on TV. So we know now not everybody you've seen on TV as a masked individual is going to be part of this payoff. It would.
Well, I think we kind of knew that. There was the one point where there were like 9 guys in devil mask costumes. That was where I thought, all right, this has gone a little goofy. If it was a core group of people and you're trying to figure out, I see folks online like zooming in and trying to analyze, like, that looks like Bobby Fish's mustache under here. That's part of the fun of it. I'm surprised that Sean left, just because he is such a really talented guy. I understand his association with Cody, and maybe he felt there was not a path forward for him in AEW. I hope that he gets picked up somewhere else, because he really is a phenomenal wrestler. And he got that 10 gimmick over in the WWE at a point in time where trying to get yourself over was highly frowned upon. So whether he gets picked up by TNA or MLW or maybe NXT as a veteran guy that can work with younger talent, I'm excited to see where Sean Spears works, and would love to see this as a way to bring his wife back into the fold. Love to see the Iconics back.
As good as Cody, as flawless of the presentation of Cody Rhodes is, and I feel bad even saying this out loud because I don't think you want to touch how he's presented, but he always did feel like a bigger deal when he had a couple guys over his shoulder in like the Nightmare Factory outfits, and you got QT there, you got Spears in the wings. I don't know if you bring in the Nightmare family as backup, but I don't hate it either, man.
I'm still waiting for Dustin to announce that he has left AEW, because I think personally, just because I always love him as a surprise Rumble entrant, and I think he's a guy that's worthy of a WWE Hall of Fame induction. I think, if you get QT and Sean Spears and Dustin to flank Cody going into a big title match, that's a strong visual right there.
DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, right?
You've gone too far. You've gone drunk with power.
Pull it back.
We're not getting the pink Cadillac.
I'm just saying, DDP was in his corner at the original All In. He was wearing the running suit and everything.
He could be the devil. He was the stalker of Sarah Undertaker.
Hey, if it's an ROH invasion, maybe it's Kerry Silken or Joe Koff, right? Wouldn't that be Joe Koff coming back for revenge on Tony Khan?
As long as it's not Rob Feinstein, I think we're okay.
RF videos. All right. WrestleNomics, small victory here. Small or big, depending on how you want to look at it. It's a magic eye, right? WrestleNomics saying that with 843 average overall viewers this week, Dynamite outdrew WWE Raw for the very first time. Of course, WWE Raw presented their best of episode, lowest viewership of all time. It went on Christmas night, but hey, a win's a win, baby. And AEW Dynamite running strong here this week.
Can't wait to see Demo God Chris Jericho tweeting about this, the downfall of WWE, the success of AEW. Best of shows in 2023 are kind of a weird novelty because you have Peacock. You can go back and watch any of these pay-per-views. Best of shows years ago were fun because I didn't buy every pay-per-view. So you may get a sliver of a match that happened 4 months prior, but hey, I get to see it. Now there's no compelling reason to tune into one of these best of shows, but I'm glad the talent gets the week off and still drawing 600 something thousand people. Not bad.
I think if they'd have put out the list of matches they were going to show on free TV as part of the best of 2023, I think that show would have done better. Because
we had no clue what it was going to be.
Dude, I was looking at the list of those matches and I was like, this is truly the best of 2023. Like you got Bad Bunny Priest, the San Juan Street fight. You got the men's War Games match. I'm pretty sure they put in Cody Brock. I'd have to go back but I think if they'd have just been like, hey,
they did Charlotte Rhea. I know for sure. I saw that.
Yeah, but I didn't watch it all. I was just kind of, but I was looking at the list. And I was like, damn, if I'd have known that they were just going to put on like legit, like their 5-star like pay-per-view matches for 3 hours, I might have put it on in the background while we're opening presents. I don't know. Yeah.
I put it on for a couple minutes just to see, because I realized like you kind of forget what day of the week it is, especially since we didn't record. And I was like, oh yeah, Raw's on. I put it on. I caught the end of the Charlotte Rhea thing. And what I liked was it was a studio show where they were interviewing the people that were part of it. So there was at least some degree of new content that was existing within this this show. So I saw there was a Jey Uso interview, there was a Rhea Ripley interview. So if you tuned in, at least it wasn't just, you know, Scott Stanford or somebody and then bumper to bumper to bumper old matches.
Yeah. Well, over at WWE World, some big news here this week from The Observer. WWE expressing interest in Giulia, who is one of the top stars in Stardom. She's also the New Japan Strong Women's Champion. WWE has interest in her, and they have interest in working with Stardom. Now, Giulia's contract expires in March with Stardom. She may not come in right away, but as of now, they're leaning towards her coming in. I've learned much more about her in the last couple weeks as she's become a big talking point. Seems like a notable free agent. And again, like Hunter is making a move in Japan. I don't know how far that move goes. Is all the talk? There's a lot of talk about NXT Europe. Obviously, they're going to move forward with that. But man, is NXT Japan like too far off? I mean, they're making some big investments over there.
I mean, it was a strategy years ago where they were going to have a branch in Japan, a branch in Mexico, a branch in Europe. I'm curious if part of this is Hunter feels like he missed out on Mariah May, who was in Stardom, who certainly looks like a major star in 2024. She looks like a can't miss prospect. And when I saw her, I'm like, she would have been front and center on an NXT. Also, Kairi Sane was part of Stardom. And now this kind of adds a little fuel to the fire of what we saw with Sasha Banks posting that she was out in front of Boston. She had a relationship with Stardom. So maybe there's a lot of rumor and innuendo about their involvement.
And a part of me thinks that, you're looking over across the aisle at what AEW is offering talents that they can't get in WWE. And one of those things is AEW allows these talents to go take a New Japan booking, take a AAA booking, right? Go work these places. Maybe you have friends there. Maybe you've just always wanted to do it. Offering that as an amenity now and taking that as a way kind of from just, only Tony Khan can offer you that. It's obviously another play to kind of help secure some of these bigger talents that they are trying to lock down at the moment.
It's possible. I don't love the idea of loaning talents out to other companies because I don't want to increase the possibility of somebody getting injured unless they're on my stage. If I'm making money off it, somebody gets injured. Hey, these things happen. That's a shame. But you don't want one of your talents wrestling on another show for another promotion and they get hurt.
Well, why not bring another talent into your promotion then? Maybe Goldberg, for instance, who this week called Vince McMahon a piece of shit and talked about how he didn't get his proper retirement match at WWE. Well, one WWE superstar stepped up to the plate and they tweeted out, "I'll have that retirement match with you, Goldberg." And that man is Ivar of the Viking Raiders, who on the surface doesn't seem like the best pick. But then I kind of skew it in my head, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe he's picking up a lot of fans these days, and obviously, would happily do the honors, I'm sure, to Bill. What do you think about Ivar shooting a shot here?
I'm a big Ivar fan. I like what he was doing with Viking Raiders. I like that he has stepped up as a singles competitor right now with Eric on the shelf. I think he had neck fusion surgery. I believe he has come on as someone who could absolutely, if they put some steam behind him, be a top heel contender. I thought there's a possibility in 2024 for Ivar to be a monster for Seth Rollins to slay if they play their cards properly. I can see why he would want to wrestle Goldberg. Personally, just perversely, I would love to see Goldberg try to get him up for a jackhammer. I don't know how well that would go. And it's really got to be tough if you're a fan of Goldberg and you want to see him get that proper retirement match, knowing his relationship with Vince and then knowing his relationship with Hunter. I don't think we're going to get it on a WWE platform unless the dollars align. And WWE is so overly stacked right now with talent. They kind of don't need Bill.
Man, I wonder if I do wonder if he shows up in like an Impact or an NWA, you know, just to be the biggest possible fish in a pond and get whatever he wants, you know, for a one-shot deal. Just throwing it out there because I'm with you. I don't see him in WWE. He's made overtures to AEW. He said that out loud. Maybe Tony wants to go all in with him, but like, again, Tony's not profitable. He's trying to show people he's getting behind his own talent right now. It would be an interesting proposition, I think, to bring Bill in for a high-profile kind of retirement feud right now, but I could be wrong. PW Insider reporting Zelina Vega has signed a new multi-year deal with the company. No other details were given, but good for her. She's a wonderful talent. Great. Yep. And
she was one that was questionable. She was going to stick around before because of the whole being able to stream your video game services.
Yeah, she was the one that kickstarted the third-party platform discussions with WWE and helped to get secured those for talent so they could keep making money there. So yes, very happy that she's found peace at WWE. She's sticking around. Somebody who's going to be walking into 2024 a little bit lighter in their step is going to be Sonya Deville, who the Courier Post is saying is no longer has a charge. The charge was dropped for unlawful possession of a weapon that was found in her car. That was, I guess, in her vehicle in Atlantic City. Basically, long story short, she did a 6-month program and they've dropped the charge, but she had it licensed in another state. It wasn't licensed in New Jersey. She had to go through some stuff and now it's dropped. So just good news for Sonya as we enter the new year.
Yeah, I think she deserves a peaceful year in 2024.
Yes. And lastly here, as we were talking, I'm surprised I didn't throw this in when we were talking about Japan earlier. The Wrestling Observer saying Takami Ohbari, the former New Japan president, he stepped down because there were issues with staff members about his usage of power over them. Another reason was that he had heat with a number of people, including the company's top star, Kazuchika Okada. Okada was said to have wanted him out. Others said that Ohbari never really understood the wrestling business, didn't respect the value of Okada, and one person said that Ohbari saw Okada as the lead role in the actor of a touring show, which is kind of accurate, but not necessarily showing grace and respect maybe to the true position of Okada within New Japan Pro Wrestling. Thoughts?
I mean, the timing of this change now is definitely curious with the idea that Okada may be coming out on the market. So maybe this was New Japan making moves to keep Okada and say, all right, you don't like this guy? He's gone. Let's put Tanahashi in power. See if maybe this keeps you around.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is a good sign that Okada's going to stick around New Japan Pro Wrestling, maybe make more AEW appearances going forward. But hey, anything's possible, and it would really be something to see him pop up in WWE next year. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our oversized edition. This is the longest that Robert and I have ever recorded. Did not plan to go this far. Also did not plan for so many technical issues with our good friend Stephen Pinu. We'll get it right next time, everybody. I want to thank everybody so much. It has been a wonderful 2024. We are literally just getting going with Rumor and Innuendo. We've seen big gains across the board. We're so thrilled with everything that you guys have done to support the show. Of course, as I always say, if you want to really show us some love, head over to your preferred podcast platform. Leave us a message. It's Friday here. I'll read an Apple iTunes review here just to kind of wrap up the week here on a good note. Here we go. I can pull this up very, very quickly. We have on Podcast Heat. All right, here we go. We'll go down. Nope, I want to open it right here. We have from Bingy80. Exactly what it says on the tin. All sorts of stories about the pro wrestling business. Loved Karpeles already from Wrestle Roast. Don't agree with everything hosts say, but it's an easy, good, funny listen. Great review. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. And I think this is like there's like an old Rumor Innuendo Apple page. I'm not really sure what's going on here. Anyway, appreciate it, guys. More messages, more wonderful messages. I'm Nick Hausman, HouseWrestling.com. Please show us the support.
And I'm Robert Karpeles. I want to make sure that it was clear here. Excited. Look, we wrapped up. I think 2023 was the best year in the history of Rumor and Innuendo. 2024 is going to be even better. So until 2024, best of luck in your future endeavors.